Yes. Hmm. Okay. Yeah, we're going to do it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. Tonight is WeHo Reads Wild and Powerful Imaginations, and I am delighted to be welcoming um, authors who are at the forefront of making waves with their creative work. And so I'm going to introduce now our participating writers, and then we'll have a bit of some business to take care of. So first of all, I want to welcome Olivas. Uh, she is a trans Xicanxfuturist, author of Sundown in San Ojuela, and alumna of the Clarion Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Workshop and the Lambda Literary Workshop. Welcome. Being here. Let me just mute my. There we go. And I am also thrilled to welcome Tuck Woodstock, who is the host of the celebrated Gender Reveal podcast and the editor of both the Lambda Literary Award-winning Too Trans, Too Furious, an extremely serious journal of transgender street racing studies, and the upcoming anthology Sex, Change, and the City. Welcome to you both. I'm so excited for this discussion and to hear your words. Before we jump into our discussion, I do want to turn it over to Mike Che from the Arts Division of the City of West Hollywood for an announcement or two.
Thank you so much, Cody, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us today on a Wednesday. I have the extreme pleasure of working for the City of West Hollywood, which is a wonderful city because we support the arts, and our city council really does follow up that statement with their support and with funds to fund programs like this. We do want to take a moment before we start to acknowledge that the land upon which the city of West Hollywood is located is the unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Teach peoples. I also want to advise our viewers that this program may contain explicit language or content. So if you are uncomfortable with that, please be advised this is a good time to log off. Before I turn it over, we do have one of our council members here who's going to say a welcome, but I just want to do a little plug for a few upcoming events. Of course, you're here for WeHo Reads. Our next WeHo Reads will be taking place on December 3rd, a Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. And you'll definitely get an email if you registered for this about that. We have some other wonderful events coming up. Jen Cheng, who is here and going to read a poem in a moment, has organized a wonderful poetry reading of the poems of Pat Parker happening this Saturday at 2 o'clock in the West Hollywood Library Community Meeting Room. And then on Sunday is the much anticipated opening of the Stories AIDS Monument at 4 o'clock, which happens in West Hollywood Park. There's a couple other things. This is, of course, Transgender Awareness Month, and the City of West Hollywood does support the transgender community. There will be a Transgender Day of Remembrance event on the 21st of November at 6 o'clock in the City Council chambers. And then it's also our 40th birthday. The city is 39.
41st.
But yeah, so there'll be a 41. It's 41. Thank you, John. So the city will be celebrating with WeHo Day on Monday, the 24th. At 6 o'clock. That'll be at the West Hollywood Aquatic and Recreation Center. You can find all this out at weho.org/calendar. And all of these events are free to attend because our city council loves to support our community. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to our council member, John Erickson, who'd like to say a few words of welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you. Like all good LGBTQ people, we're always lying about our age, so it's okay. Don't worry. We are only 41 years old. And I do that purposely because I am the same age as the city, so I'm not there just yet. So there you go. Really want to thank our incredible panelists tonight. topic and theme is so fitting to the work of the city and the arts program for which we do, especially making sure that we're celebrating all of the incredible work that is forthcoming and honoring and uplifting artists who are making a difference and using our platforms to do so. So to all of our amazing panelists, thank you for giving us a little bit of your excellence, your fabulousness, as well as all of your incredible work that you're doing and sharing with us. And I just want to thank you all, because a statement of a budget is a statement of priorities. And it's nice to see that in West Hollywood, we're directly investing in the art in that way. So I want to turn it over to our incredible poet laureate of the city of West Hollywood, my good friend, the incomparable Jen Chang, to kick us off.
Thank you, John. I so appreciate the city's support for the arts. I am a library nerd, and I'm honored to serve as poet laureate for City of West Hollywood. And I cannot do justice for what our panelists are going to talk about today. So instead, I'm going to read a poem from Andrea Gibson to celebrate how they really took on something and transformed it. The poem is titled Instead of Depression. Instead of depression, try calling it hibernation. Imagine the darkness is a cave in which you will be nurtured by doing absolutely nothing. Hibernating animals don't even dream. It's okay if you can't imagine spring. Sleep through the alarm of the world. Name your hopelessness in a quiet hollow, a place you go to heal, a den you dug, sweetheart, instead of a grave. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jen. That was beautiful. Thanks for sharing that and finding that. So great. Now, it's us, Mara, Tuck, and Charlie Jane. When Charlie Jane's back, I will intro her. But I do want to start us off. Hey, there we go. Okay, so Charlie Jane Anders is the award-winning author of Lessons in Magic and Disaster, recently published, a new novel about a trans witch who teaches her mother magic. And so we're going to be talking about that work today, hearing from some of Charlie Jane's work, and it's just lovely to have you. So where I want us to start is a discussion of imagination. And I want to hear from each of you, like, your relationship to your own imagination. It's one of the, the primal forces that powers our creative work. It powers our writing, our literary citizenship, and our daily lives. And I'd love to hear some reflections on the power of imagination from each of you. And Charlie Jane, if you're ready, we could start with you, unless you need a minute to settle in. You're on mute.
Sorry, I just came from another event and I didn't even have a chance to put on makeup, and I didn't even realize this was a gender reveal shirt. I just love this shirt and I wear it all the time. I didn't remember where I got it from. I just got it from the internet, and so I'm glad I'm representing for gender reveal. That's awesome. Yeah, imagination. It's so funny. Not to brag, but in a week I'm receiving the Arthur C. Clarke Award for Imagination in the Service of Society. I'm going to the French Embassy in Washington, D.C., and they're giving me an award, and I have to give a speech about imagination in the service of society. So I've been thinking about this topic a lot because I have to, represent for it soon. And I think that I'll just give you all a little preview of my speech, which is probably going to be a newsletter afterwards. I have this thing in my writing advice book, Never Say You Can't Survive, where I say that imagination is a way of resisting domination. And that if you have your imagination, it's a way of just not letting people dominate you. It's a way of refusing to be dominated by other people. And what I'm going to say in my speech, especially since I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., is that I think the opposite is also true. People who want to dominate others do not have an imagination. They cannot imagine anything better than hierarchy, than crushing other people under their boot. And I think that kind of turning it on its head like that has really helped me to think about imagination differently lately, because I think that imagination is the thing that lets us be better to ourselves and to others. I mean, it also can, you can imagine horrible cruelty, you can imagine, awful stuff. I just went to a talk the other day about the theater of cruelty. So I know that that's a thing that we can use imagination for, but I think that you cannot really make a better, you know, better society, a better social relationship without imagination. And so I've always used, like, since I was very little, I've always used imagination as a form of escape. But I think that imagination has also been the only way that I've been able to find a better kind of relationship with other human beings, and a better, like, like something that's not as hierarchical, something that's not as abusive. I think that imagination, and I think that's what makes it queer, because I think that as queers, we are negotiating our relationships. We are trying to find relationships that are more just and meaningful. And that is a thing that imagination helps us to do. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. I feel lucky we got to hear your thinking before it comes at the award ceremony. Congratulations on that award. That is amazing and well deserved. Thank you, Charlie Jane. Mara, your relationship with your imagination.
So, oh, sorry, I couldn't get the audio to unmute for a second. But I'm here now.
You're good.
Um, Imagine
Yay.
that. Um, yeah, I think this is a fascinating question, and I don't know if I have an answer to it because I think I'm on the completely other end of the spectrum for from Charlie, in that I do this completely unexamined, I suppose, and that I much more follow the whims of my imagination, and I haven't put much thought into where they come from. Also, congratulations, Charlie. You deserve this. That's so awesome. But also, I think for me, what like I've I've been describing my writing process as someone who like recently graduated an MFA program and kind of got really burnt out by the like with writing by the end of the program, and having to like rediscover the joy of it and the joy of playing with language. Is that like I've always like I feel like writing and like has come to me as a like exercise in obsession, and that my imagination often hyperfixates on things that I am, for one reason or another, compelled by. Like I often cite the things that compelled me as a young child, like giant robots or like kaiju, slasher films, etc. Things with teeth, and claws and things, and that I always found them like fun and exciting and like cool designs in like the film and like comic media that I largely consumed as a child. And like I often just like think about that stuff all the time because I usually do. And writing has often kind of, I would say similarly, has been a point of like a toy box for me where I can play with the things that I got to like engage with as a child, but on my own terms, right? Is that taking the things that like shaped me and then being able to in turn shape them back. Like I who care so deeply about like giant monsters and giant robots can now write my own narrative about them, where a trans Chicana narrative can be at the core of that rather than something that's a bit more culturally specific to like Japan. I'm using these genre tropes and doing it my way. I have a short story coming out in my we just announced this, so I'm allowed to talk about this, but Lanternfish is doing they're publishing my short story collection, Sangononas, and other things with teeth. Wow, look at that. Yeah, well, how fitting. And in that we have a story about this dead kaiju, like that's actually just a giant robot, and it's just like chilling in the shallows of this sea of this coastal town, and I get to like I just wanted to write about the giant robot, like, but it's also this really fun exploration of like entering the body of this protagonist's mother who couldn't accept her transition, because she was the one who built the robot and poured a lot of her own self into the creation of this machine. Um, and just like me recontextualizing why like my dynamic with giant robots and like what I think is compelling about them, this like large amount of like heavy machinery and man-made potential and power and rendering it something as an intimate exploration of one's body and one's relationship with their like paternal mother. And I just get like that is kind of where my imagination stems from, is just playing with, I don't know, the things that I obsess over and think about nonstop. And then once I've finished writing it, my brain is vacated a bit and the thing is outside of me. And I can look at it over there and maybe pick it up and look at it and admire it and put it on my shelf with all of my other funky things. Um, and then I never think about it again, which is the really fascinating thing. Is my notebooks are filled with detailed notes of characters from my past stories. It's all I write about. And then once the story's done, I never come back to those characters, which is very, like, I seldom do. Um, which is, I guess, me just like exercising and saying what I need to say with those
Mm,
things, and then just kind of moving on to the next thing that pulls my whimsy along. And I'm trying to really remind myself that I want to just get pulled along with whimsy and not think too hard or academically or trying to intellectualize the things that I am compelled by, and just kind of like rolling with it.
mhm.
Um,
That's so the arc of your answer is so fascinating to me because you started with like imagination as obsession as something you experience, and then through the creative process it's something that it seems like you're able to play with and exert more control over and transform it. So that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, my grand so this me waxing poetic about the imagination. I can just go on about this for hours because I have no thesis here, but I'm gonna put stop it there.
We'll come back. We'll come back to it, of course. It's the theme of the night. So we've had, imagination as a moral muscle about the world we want to create. Imagination as something acting on us. Tuck, let's hear you triangulate with those two responses. How are you thinking about imagination these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both right. I mean, my relationship to imagination in my work is different in that, like, I just make up the prompts for other people to do because I don't have the part of my brain where I'm making up stories myself. So instead, editing. I'm editing other people's work. Sometimes it's based on existing IP even, and sometimes it's not. Yeah, exactly. I love it's kind of trying to blur your background. So just Carrie appears. Yeah, so I think that and like it's not as direct, but I think what I see people talking about in terms of imagination a lot in my work is, as both of our other speakers alluded to in different ways, like just the importance of being able to imagine trans futures and trans possibilities, because there are so few existing models right now that, yeah, that anything we can do to imagine like a world for us, as Charlie was speaking to, is so important. And a lot of my work with my podcast, which is called Gender Reveal, is asking each guest we've ever had over the last 8 years, in your ideal future, what would you imagine the future of gender to be? And so I'm not so much like being the person who's doing the imagining every week, but I am like soliciting hundreds of different potential features of gender so that people can sort of sort through them and think about what they'd like the future to look like for themselves. So I guess I'm more of a curator in that regard.
Yeah, and coming up with the questions to get imagination fueling into other people's stuff. Well, so what you couldn't see before are these two fabulous books, Two Trans, Two Furious, and Sex Change in the City, which like is brand new, like
It's brand
brand new.
new. Yeah,
Yeah.
this last week. Last week.
And I just want to say like the imagination required to like imagine yourself and your community into like pop culture where you're not represented is
Yeah.
like really interesting and wild. So like that was really cool to see.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that, but thank you for that
Yeah.
response. All right, so sort of on this subject, but maybe transitioning a little bit more, I want to hear from each of you about more about your advocacy. So each of you talked in some ways about social justice or about the role of the writer in your communities. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're thinking about that, especially Tuck, I think in the intro to Two Trans, Two Furious, you referred to it as these trying times. which was true when the book came out, and it's still true. And hey, it's maybe always true. So I'd love to hear from each of you about your perspectives on being a writer and advocating for social justice. I'm going to put my fun background back on. There we go. Charlie, maybe we could start with you. Or wait, no, Tuck. Let's do it reverse order. Let's go you first, and then Mara, and then Charlie. Jane.
Cool. Yes, happy to talk about this. So I think it's interesting. I was just talking with Levi, who wrote two amazing books, Stone Fruit and Now Canon, and she was talking about how her advocacy and her like work as a novelist felt completely separate to her. Like she's really, really politically motivated and then also writes these beautiful works. And she was like, I don't think that I'm actually doing the same thing with both of them. I think they're pretty separate. And I was like, well, I think that your work actually really explores what it means to be in relationship with each other. And if we look at Dean Spade's new book, Love and Effective World, we can see that like one of the main things tearing our movement apart is failure to cultivate thriving relationships interpersonally because we need those in order to keep doing the work. So I think that my work is a little bit of both. Some of it is more overtly political, I would say, with like the podcast that I do. We talk a lot about like just explicitly like how to organize, like what the issues are right now, specifically for different groups of people, how we can show up for them, what it looks like to live in the world as different people, and also lots of more fun things than that as well. But the books specifically are more about having a good time as a mode of resistance, like truly just like shitposting as resistance. And I talk about that pretty explicitly in both intros, but especially in the new one in Sex Change in the City. You can like see me talking myself into uh, the fact that maybe it's okay to make the book by saying things like, this is like a really difficult time. Healthcare is being criminalized for trans people, immigrants are being deported. You could certainly argue that it would make more sense for us to use the time that I spent on this book to like do know your rights workshops and like, compound estrogen. But I do think that the people who are doing that important work deserve to live like well-rounded lives and they get to have moments where they are also experiencing the joy of making an argument for why Charlotte from Sex and the City should start HRT. Like we're all like well-rounded individuals. We're not just responses to trauma and responses to harm. And so I think that it's really important for me that while we're going through like all of this adversity in various ways, depending on who we are and who our family is, like we get to also have these moments where we're like, you can't take, like, not to be like so cheesy, but like you cannot take like joy and creativity away from us. We're going to keep doing it no matter what else is going on. And that is the book form of the activism as well as the like more pointed like grants and mutual aid work that we've been doing for years.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think we all deserve to have joy and to see ourselves in represented, but also just to have a laugh. Um, and sometimes we go to dark places, and sometimes that's, part of it too. Mara, do you want to share a little bit about role of the writer, the visions that you have?
Was that a covert little transition to be like sometimes it goes to dark places, introducing the funky little horror writers sitting like squatting on her chair in the corner, and here I
Which
am.
helps us like, grapple with, I mean, I think a lot of horror is about grappling with the things in life that scare us or that like terrify us.
Yeah, and so at the minute you asked the question, I was like, fuck, I wish I didn't open at my coffee shop this morning. My brain is a little bit of like fried at the moment. I was on my 4 shots of espresso have like like
Oh,
plummeted.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, they're all double shots, by the way. But we don't need to get into that. What we do need to get into is this conversation. And I'm going to try my best to sound coherent. And to this, I think I I haven't I've often hesitated to in regards to like my own self, and I don't know where it comes from and where this insecurity manifests from, but I hesitate often to talk about my work as like a form of like activism or any type of like rhetoric in that kind of way, like something that's like participating in the larger whole. And I know it is, but I always hesitate to like self-aggrandize myself in some way of like saying that like these stories are doing like important work. And of course all our work is doing important stuff. But like when I have organized, like when I have like joined my friends and done like like sign making and like gone into like do protests and like show up to the event where people just need to like block Port of Oakland and stuff, like I do see those as separate things. As like to me that matters a lot. Like I don't think one should take precedent over the other. And but then my more optimistic self says that like, well, all of these things feed into one another. Is that like these things inspire my work, and because these are like these are the things I choose to be to the components of my life, and that my work also helps to at least to some regard like inspire or like tantalize imagination and to slowly push people to perhaps be a little bit more radical. I feel like I'm not sure how much I'm willing to say it these days, but I feel like in the past I would say that I would describe my work a bit more as propaganda itself, and that I wanted to, but I'm not sure I agree with what I once perceived as the definition of propaganda. But I definitely want my work to have people start to, who might not have as radical opinions as they did at the start of the piece, to kind of slowly, through the use of the speculative, to kind of break down and like the all the mental gymnastics people use to normalize atrocity, pull it away to kind of just see everything bare and like that grotesque underbelly that has just been hiding in plain sight. Which is why I often play with horror. I think horror has been the place where I'm able to just like take these things that are mundane, that are horrific, and just like really putting them on stage and like giving them the claws and fangs that they already have, but like really showing it off and like being able to comment on that. I think horror has always been political, and in the past it has the risk of being rather reactionary, or it's doing something really like it's the genre that I've often said as the one where it's expected to be taboo, that you're expected to do some like it's the place where you really can push the envelope and say and do controversial and uncomfortable things because that comes innate with the subject matter. And when I'm able to write these horrific stuff, like characters seldom get out with a happy ending in my work. And I think that to me, while that might not be cathartic for some readers, it is for me because I think there's a level of like me gaining power and controlling the narrative of being the writer myself. And there's this level of writing it is cathartic for me because I'm exploring these traumas that I've seen plague my community, seeing like time and time again, seeing like these videos of like people in the Latina community getting ripped away from their families into unmarked cars by masked fucking like ghouls, or like seeing another news article about a dismembered child because she was a trans woman. And like that shit is horrifying to me. And that I writing horror is often how I'm able to cope and process it, and also just like recontextualize the power of that. My characters are often the ones trying to fight these horrors that they exist in within the world. And I like oftentimes my stories, even though they have often bleak endings, I do want to at least push to some kind of messaging of like hope, and if not hope, resistance. And that like don't, if you're gonna go down, don't do it with a like a dog with your tail tucked between your legs. You have to keep doing it with your fists swinging, you know? Or maybe we actually like pull together and some of us make this out fucking alive. Which is again a very final girl thing to do, a very slasher perspective of it.
Yeah.
And like to me, it's really cathartic to write it. And I hope in some regards that it matters to the people whose community I'm speaking to. And I know it does. Like in my hopeful moments when I feel like my work matters, I do know that there's like I've heard things that people have told me where they've said that like, hey, I read this piece when like I was going through a very difficult time in my life about the subject matter you wrote about, and it really helped me like get through that. And I feel like that is what any writer ever hopes to hear, that
Hmm.
your work does matter for something. And it, yes, it's cathartic for me. Art is often my own way of just processing the world and processing my own emotions, but finding out that like I'm not unique and that I know what I'm dealing with is not, I'm not the only one dealing with it, and that other people are going to resonate with it too. And then seeing the proof, hearing it that people do, and that it helps them, I think
Yeah.
matters. And then I hope that they go into their lives and make small changes, and that like there's all so many different fronts to the machine of resistance, and that we all have different roles to play, and that we're all multifaceted and have at times different like roles within this same project that we're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely matters. Yeah. I mean, humans need stories. Charlie Jane.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in my writing, I'm always kind of thinking about relationships and how people connect to each other. And that is how I think about activism too, is that, it's kind of like what Tuck and Mata were saying about, we have to show up for each other. We have to find joy. We have to find community. We have to like be able to like, we're not going to make it otherwise. And that's how we fight. That's how we survive. I feel like that is something that I'm always thinking about in my creative work for sure. Lessons in Magic and Disaster kind of started out as a really intimate story, a family story about a mother and a daughter, and like the mom is dealing with some really heavy stuff, and the daughter decides to teach the mom how to do magic to help her through it. And it was originally just going to be a really small, intimate family story, but it kind of, because of the way the world is and because of wanting to understand the characters and what they're connected to, it ended up being much more of a story about activism than I thought it was going to be. Because a lot of what's going on with the mom has to do with her past as an activist, and a lot of what's going on with the daughter, Jamie, has to do with being a trans woman in academia and in just the world, and trying to help to help to keep culture alive, but also to fight for trans inclusion. And it ends up being a lot of like, I feel like I always come back to the notion of like people learning to see each other more clearly, learning to connect with each other, and finding community. And I think that the community part is a huge part of why, of how of my kind of theory of activism. I'm not, as an activist, I will definitely, I'm a foot soldier rather than a general. I will show up for protests. I will show up for stuff. I'm not the person who organizes that stuff. When I organize things, they tend to be more community building events. I do a lot of events for trans people in San Francisco where it's just like, it's a social, it's a hangout, it's a gathering, but inevitably it's also mutual aid, and it's also about like helping people to like get connected to resources and connect, just make more connections with each other. And I organize literary events, I organize events to support local bookstores, but I'm always kind of trying to like, I feel like, to the extent that I do anything other than write books, a lot of what I do is just community building. And like, and I don't think of that as activism really. I think of that as some, I don't even know what I label it as, but I think if you pan out, maybe it is activism in after a fashion, for sure. And it is a lot of what I write about as well. It's just, I do think of them as separate parts of my life, but it is true that community is an important thing in my fiction, and building community is a lot of what I do the rest of the time, kind of.
Hmm. Yeah, I your science fiction series with the teenagers who are taken off the
Oh
planet
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and come together. I mean, that felt like it's about them becoming a community together, right? So I
Yeah,
mean,
like chosen family. I mean,
absolutely.
we love our chosen family stories. We
Yeah.
do.
So maybe shifting a little bit away from discussion, I'd love to hear, short readings from each of you so we can get a flavor of your work and the audience can enjoy hearing from you. Charlie Jane, because we were just talking, why don't you go first if you're ready for it?
Yeah, let me see. I'm gonna read a passage I've never read before. How long do you want us to read for?
Like 5 minutes or so? Up to
Okay.
8 if you wish,
Um,
and maybe give us
okay,
a little
so
intro.
um I'm gonna read a section I've never read before. that is the section where Jamie, my main character, comes out as trans as a teenager. And she's just gone missing and her parents don't know where she is. And I've never read this section before, so I hope it works. May had last checked on Jamie 90 minutes ago before Serena had gotten home from the forum. Jamie had been ensconced, headphones on, math textbook yawning flat. During the whole intense conversation about activism and community and everything, Jamie had somehow slipped out into the thickening darkness. Serena and May called Jamie's new cell phone. Nothing. Nope's parents hadn't seen her, and Nope was at home playing Halo. There was nothing for it but to search for Jamie again, this time in the dark, with no clue where to start. Serena suggested that May could stay put in case Jamie came home, but May responded that 2 pairs of eyes were better. They settled for leaving a note on Jamie's bed. Call us if you get this. Sorry, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. Somewhere between the skaters' parking lot and the smoker pit under the river bridge, Serena slipped on duck shit and landed on her right knee, like a hot poker to the meniscus. She limped forward in the dark, clutching her leg with the hand that didn't hold a flashlight, just hoping the damage was temporary. She'd ice her knee when she got home. For now, she yelled, R, which is Jamie's dead name, over again and again until her voice started to fail. Once or twice, people shouted, "Yeah, shut up," from the darkness, and she ignored them. I can keep this family safe, Jamie had said. What if Jamie thought the family was safer without her? Had Serena missed a warning sign? She was never going to forgive herself if that conversation with Jamie had turned out to be her last chance to reach her. Serena's knee kept giving her hell, and it was closing in on midnight. She had a meeting first thing. The flashlight didn't illuminate the mist so much as decorate it with wet sparkles. Just let R be okay. I'll give anything. I'll never let her out of my sight again. The wet wind picked up. It was after midnight. Serena had no ready answer for May's questions, which wasn't really a question so much as a call for reassurance. Just before Serena hit send on the least bad response to May's text, Jamie's voice came. Mom, is that you? Jamie was sitting in a half lotus position in the middle of a decrepit community garden, bugs and dirt and worms crawling all over her. Framed in the beam of Serena's flashlight, she looked like a weird statue. With the rain pelting around her, her face and her hair were drenched. Her clothes were unrecognizable. What are you doing out here? Serena asked. Jamie tried to rise but wobbled. Oh, my leg fell asleep. I must have lost track of time. I came out here to do a quick. It doesn't matter. Are you okay? Is Mama okay? Is everything okay? Serena erased the text she'd been about to send and instead wrote that she'd found the missing child with their location. Then she threw her arms around her soaking wet kid, holding on tight, as if every ounce of strength in her arms and shoulders could defy loss itself. You gave us a fright, she choked out. What were you thinking? You were grounded for 2 months. We love you so much. Please don't ever disappear like this again. I am revoking your video game challenge, your video game privileges. You're okay. I've got you. You're okay. Don't ever vanish like that again. And then May showed up and had to hug both of them in the rain. Back home, Serena discovered that they were out of the fancy cocoa, but there were foil-lined packets of Swiss Miss from some conference that Serena had helped to organize. As usual, Serena's attempts to get information out of this kid came to naught. She and May weren't so much good cop and bad cop, more like literal cop and figurative cop. We're not angry, May said, though Serena was screaming on the inside. At least not seriously. We'll get over it. We just want to understand. Did something upset you? Is there anything we can do to help? We're always here. I promise you everything is fine, Jamie said, face utterly placid, eyes bright and clear. I was testing a theory. Serena wanted to ask, what the fuck? But May shushed her. And did your theory pan out? May asked. I'm not sure, Jamie said. It's a work in progress. Skipping ahead a little bit. I do have something to tell you guys, Jamie said. I've been waiting for the right moment or freaking out about how you'll react. It's a lot. It's more than you can possibly guess. Serena perched on the low end of the fainting couch. As Jamie was flanked by both parents, they waited, trying to stay present but not crowd their child. Okay. Jamie took a deep breath and suddenly there were tears in her eyes. She quivered. So I'm not a boy. I'm a girl, okay? I'm a girl, and my name isn't R. I don't know. I was thinking Rosie. You can call me Rosie for now, at least. I hope. I mean, I hope. I don't know. Her voice stayed level and reasonable, even though her body was shaking and her eyes had gone red. Rosie, May said, that's a lovely name. It really is, Serena said. Thank you for trusting us with this. We'll call you Rosie until you can tell us some other name. We'll be so proud to have you as our daughter. For the second time since midnight, the three of them were embracing, holding on as tight as they could. Jamie was still trembling, and May brushed her forehead and said everything was good. It was all good. Jamie's parents were proud of her. As soon as Jamie came out to Serena and May as trans, they got her a birthday cake a month later with pink frosting spelling out Jamie's new name, Rosie. Her name wasn't Jamie for months. She was experimenting with being Rosie. And Jamie cried a lot. A few months after that, Jamie noticed Serena sneaking glances and closing her laptop whenever Jamie approached, as if Serena didn't want Jamie to see what she'd been searching for. Jamie's mind immediately went to, oh, she's caught a nasty case of turf, and a bitter root snarled around Jamie's intestinal wall. She started to shy away from her mother until her other mother, May, noticed and asked what in the sainted name of Betty Dodsworth was going on. May sat Serena and Jamie down at the kitchen table and grilled the two of them. Oh, sweetie, Serena said, oh, Rosie, I would never presume to know you better than you know yourself. I love you and I support you. You should always know that. I have never worried like this before. She struggled to find some words, her throat tightening and releasing, steam from the plain red mug, curled and twisted in the air. She said, it's just, how could I keep you safe? I'm sorry. It scares me what this world will do. You're so beautiful. You've always been beautiful, but there are people out there who won't see it. I don't want you to have to go through the same thing that May and I went through as queer women back in the day, except worse, because transphobia is everywhere now. I wish I could make the world treat you like you deserve. I know it's not my fight, but I wish it didn't have to be anyone's fight. Turned out Serena had been going down a rabbit hole of reading about violence against trans women and bathroom bills and the rates of homelessness and unemployment and discrimination and everything else. She'd driven herself into a frenzy of worrying because now Jamie wasn't a white cis boy after all, and that meant America was not going to clear a sunlit golden path for her. This is why you don't look at the internet after 9 p.m., May said, tugging the closed wet laptop away from Serena.
Yay. Thank you.
I wanted to write a thing where someone comes out to her, their parents, and it's actually nice and it's not horrible. And I wanted that. I don't know. I wanted us to have that.
I wish I could make the world treat you the way you deserve. Great.
Yep.
That's a perfect sentiment. And even, more touching coming from a parent. So this is the book. That's beautiful. Look at those colors. My gosh. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that excerpt. And this time I'm going to put the spotlight on right away so we're now going to hear from Olivas reading us something.
Thank you. I am like, should I have prepped exactly what I was going to read? Yes. Do I usually do that the moment before? Yes. Do I usually decide right before I'm about to read? Absolutely. Did that happen this time? No. I'm like currently flipping through the book, wondering like, uh, what section would I like to read to you guys? Um, but I think I have it.
There we go.
I kind of opened to a page of my novel that's a bit short and something that I think is a bit exciting.
Mm.
It's a sequence that was probably one of the hardest ones to write. For some context, this takes place around halfway through the book, and it has to do with a mother standing up for her queer kid. And I think that's really fitting. Chapter 5, Escape. It's 5 of Section 4. Elena rushed back and forth across the house, from the closet at the end of the hallway to the dresser in Julian's room, snatching up passports and sweaters and whatever else might be useful. Two and a half full suitcases waited on the bed, coughing loose shirts and hastily folded jeans. It wasn't a lot, but then again, she'd only needed what she could carry. The rest could stay behind with the house, their lives here. Where they were going, they wouldn't need it. Elena had called her cousin Yvette in Nevada an hour ago, asking if she and Julian could stay with them. It would be a 6-hour drive through the night across the San Bernardino Mountains and over the wide stretches of high desert, not unlike the drive she used to take to and from Mexico City all the time when she was young and craved adventure. Coffee and Red Bull were all she'd needed to reach the air mattresses already being prepped for Yvette's living room. Just one more quick drive. The police had called her as she was leaving work. She was still in her hostess uniform, the smell of onions wafting off the fabric. Her feet ached and her eyelids fought the weight of themselves when she'd answered the phone. The "Hello, this is Deputy Raymond" was all she needed to hear. I meant that they were looking for Julian, that it was serious, and that she would not offer them any information they could use. "Is he okay?" Elena asked. "We're trying to figure that out, but he might be dangerous and could hurt those around him. So if you find him, let us know and we could try and help as best we can." Bullshit. She called Julian a half dozen times on the drive home and stopped amid packing to try yet again, but her calls went to voicemail every time. His phone must be dead. Or they'd gotten to him already. The latter possibility was a cold fist at the bottom of her stomach. Between the living room and the kitchen, Helena stopped to make one final call. Voicemail, an outdated recording of her son's voice from when he was 15 and she'd finally managed to buy him his first smartphone. "Hi, it's Julian Zavala's phone." A teen's crackling voice. "Leave a message and I'll try to call you back or something." Elizabeth spoke after the insufferable beep and begged him to please just come straight home. There wasn't much in the suitcase she decided was Julian's. Clothing and records and notebooks he drew in when all were all he'd want to take. Her own took more time. She had to gather the clothes, but also things like her citizenship papers and Julian's birth certificate, which she tucked into an orange folder and stored in a pocket at the bottom of the suitcase. All she needed now was to pick a piece of her husband to bring. His pajamas, his wallet, the vinyl Godzilla toy she'd bought for him at the flea market. She'd settled for the picture she kept in the hallway, him and her and Julian between them. The house she could lose. It had been too big for years. Pots and pans she could rebuy, and the furniture had never suited her taste anyways. But that picture. "I'm not a bad parent," she thought, then redacted, reworded, and said it aloud. "I'm trying not to be a bad parent." In their photo, there wasn't any darkness to her son. That had crept in later, after his father's death, in the blind spot of Elena's memory when she was busy teaching herself English and learning to file taxes, all the pieces she had to pick up mid-stride and keep running for. For months after the funeral, she'd kept up with that speed, determined not to sink into the mud. She would not drown. And in the meantime, Julian grew up. He met a boy, and Elena had to cut ties with certain family members who might have helped with their financial struggles. Were they not busy whispering bigotry disguised as Catholic concern? Then, half a year later, Riley committed suicide, and Samuel dug his claws into Julian. I let it happen, and for what? Pride? For money? No, the truth was she'd let him go on doing so because deep down she was afraid of her son, afraid of the bones he'd tinkered with even as a toddler in the yard, the way they'd bounce and jump from his fingertips, of his dreams of flayed women, of coyotes that howled in the distance whenever he'd cry at night. She'd pawn him off to Samuel de Jorge, hoping he would understand the alien brightness growing brighter within him. Elena had packed the photograph, zipped up the suitcase. She jogged to the front door to start the car, but yelped when the door swung open. There in the hall stood Samuel Del Jorge. Elena stumbled backwards and slipped, collapsed against the floor on her heels and hands. Samuel stepped inside. "Hola," he said. "¿Qué hace aquí?" Elena gasped. He stepped closer, looking down at her. In flat, dispassionate English now, he said they'd taken him. "Sale de mi casa." Escúchame, he spat, clenched teeth. He grabbed her biceps with impossible strength and hoisted her up and set her back onto trembling feet. Uh, "De lo que hace, entiendes lo que?" He stopped. His eyes flinched to the keys clutched in Elena's fist. "¿A dónde vas?" He grabbed her wrist. The wall rattled when he pinned her against it. You would take him away from me. Elena dropped her keys. Samuel lunged for them, as she'd hoped he would, and he caught them in his palm. She'd already yanked the lamp. When he caught them in his palm, she'd already yanked the lamp off the side table next to her and exploded it against the back of his skull. He dropped without a scream, and she hit him again with the lamp's metal skeleton. Once, twice, dropped what was left of it into the spatters of blood beside Samuel's twitching body. She heaved for air, hand against the wall for balance. Samuel twitched in the sticky puddle growing around his head. In his open hand waited the keys. Alana snatched them up and then ran to the kitchen landline to began punching in 911, but her fingers cramped after the first nine, and after the nine, and she heard a gurgle from the hall, a gurgle and then spitting, and then Samuel's labored laughing. Elena fought the stiff tendons in her fingers, tried to flex her hand, but it would not move. Her whole arm was stiff, her feet stapled to the floor. She turned her head so she could see him, pushing himself up to sit again, up into sitting, slumped against the wall. You stupid bitch, Samuel choked. You just had to make this so fucking hard, didn't you? Stubborn bitch. He winced in pain. The whole house shuddered with him. You have it too, don't you? Julian's gift. The Tetero chose you, but you fought it and won. You didn't even know what you had, huh? What you let go unclaimed. Then they found it in him instead, in your boy. But well, I wasn't chosen. It was a power I had to seize, and one that cost me. Your son helped me manage that toll. He stopped to groan and roll his grotesque head. He chuckled. I believe you've fractured my skull. I can feel my very self leaking out, but fear not, the darkness will press it back in. You fucking bitch. Elena wasn't listening. Her heart thrashed in her chest. Her head ached. Her headache was back, burning a hole right through her skull. You're deranged, she spat, and it was all she could do. Pathetic old piece of shit. You're gonna die if you don't get help right now. Suéltame. But that was when Elena spotted it, that spindly creature inching its way around Samuel's shoulder, crawling down his hand, lacing its fingers with his. The hand was decayed, stinking of pus and rot, and from its stump black tendrils sprouted. These tendrils slithered up his forearm and pressed against the hinge of his elbow until the meat gave way. They injected themselves into his veins, started sucking the color from Samuel's cheeks and into the hand's now rosy fingertips. Samuel held that hand in his own tenderly, as though it were a lover's. Elena tried to scream, but a swipe of those interlocked hands and her jaw snapped shut. No, we're not having that, he said. There was a dead, hungry look in him, those paled out eyes. Tears stung in hers and blurred away all that horror until he was just a shape staggering up, arms outstretched. This is my last chance to actually get what I need to stay alive. And you can't ruin it. I can't have you have that. Elena tried one last time to cry out for help, but all she could manage was the struggled scream with her mouth shut, and then her elbow snapped backwards, next her wrist. Then more bones cracking, no longer at the joints. The pain was loud, searing, enveloping. Elena screwed her eyes shut, and as the pain flooded her, she prayed, for the first time since her husband had died, Dios por favor, ayuda a mi hijo. And that's the end of that chapter. Love a happy little moment.
So, as a horror fan, I enjoy this so much. I was rooting for Elena in the book. I was rooting for Julian, and Samuel can, he can suck it because he is like that villain. Man, you
We
did a
love
great
an
job
evil, messy, like European vampire trying to appropriate Mexican vampirism.
by carrying that hand around, right? So this is the book horror fans highly recommend. Um, Thank you for sharing that excerpt. So visceral. Ugh.
I hadn't read that one aloud. I'm like, there's probably a lot of context I could have told you guys at the start of it, but you know what? We roll with it.
Yes,
I got
yes.
sick of reading the same few chapters over and over again.
Strong brujeria, right? Very cool. Thank you. Tuck, we'd love to hear you read something of yours or from the book. Your choice.
Yeah, so kind of both. I'm going to read the intro to the new collection because that's what I have been reading lately on this tour that I'm in the middle of. I'm not going to read the whole thing, not that it's very long. Uh, there's also, sorry. There's also a bunch of footnotes that I won't be reading, so just imagine what if there was more context in the footnotes. Anyway, this is part of the introduction. It's called Welcome to the Straight People Zoo. And it starts with a list. So, a military themed barbecue restaurant, a bridal shower on Long Island, a college football tailgate at a Wisconsin fraternity, a John Mayer concert in 2006. At some point, despite our best efforts, we have all found ourselves visiting some version of what I call the Straight People Zoo. These zones of peak heterosexuality are fascinating up to a point, with their cryptic social customs and bizarre meeting rituals. But despite my perverse fascination with the intricacies of straight culture, I prefer to engage at a safe distance in a venue with quick and accessible exits. So while you won't spot me on safari at the Country Music Festival in Tampa or the 4th of July car show in Reno, you just might find me visiting my favorite virtual straight people zoo, that is to say, watching Sex and the City. My straight people zoo excursions to Sex and the City have taught me so much. For example, I've learned that straight people will lust after a white jazz bassist in a pork pie hat, but flee when they suspect he has ADHD. They do not get tested for STIs. They do not even necessarily know what chlamydia is. If pressured, they will abandon their favorite vibrator or dump a guy for eating pussy too well. This is why I love the straight people zoo. For all the hardships that queer people face, structural oppression, polycule drama, etc., it's reassuring to remember that the alternatives are somehow worse. It is in this spirit, celebrating queer cultural superiority in the face of whatever heterosexuals are doing, that I first conceptualized sex change in the city. But while my approach was anthropological at best and gawking at worst, many submissions surprised me by earnestly empathizing with the characters of Sex and the City. Despite artist Sarah Esikoff's claim that everyone is a Miranda because, quote, she's the only one who isn't completely ridiculous, our contributors connected with Charlotte's repressed curiosity, Carrie's cringeworthy romanticism, and Samantha's stubborn independence. Their work explores the shame of secret relationships, the rage of middle age, the grief of losing a parent, and, of course, the embarrassment of being non binary. Perhaps this sounds heavy for a book titled Sex Change in the City. If so, let me assure you that much like its source material, this anthology rarely remains serious for more than 5 consecutive minutes. Between essays on rejection and regret, readers can expect plenty of sex, mostly featuring Steve with various genitalia, and the city via a guided bus tour across Manhattan, as well as comics, paintings, poetry, Mad Libs, MASH, and a role playing game. Immediately after one of Sex Change in the City's most emotionally devastating pieces, you will find a literal picture of an ass. We've curated the book this way because we assume you've come to the Straight People Zoo in the hope of having fun. To that end, we don't devote many pages to litigating Sex in the City's countless sins. Rather than sternly condemning Samantha for mistreating her trans neighbors, we subject her to the ghosts of transsexual past, transsexual present, and transsexual future. Instead of explaining why biphobia is bad, we contrast Carrie's visit to, quote, Alice in confused sexual orientation land with the bisexual writer's experience at their first straight party on a Williamsburg rooftop. We don't dissect Sex Change in the City's countless instances of racism, not because the show isn't so very deeply racist, but because we assume you've already suffered through those episodes and might instead enjoy learning which Sex in the City quote is your breakup style or which of Carrie's companions is most likely to start HRT. I do sometimes wonder whether it's imprudent to expend resources on another goofy anthology when everyone is, suffering. In the months since we announced this project, the United States government has upheld healthcare bans for trans youth, restricted trans passport access, and abducted thousands of immigrants. One could certainly argue that our collective time would be better spent compounding our own estrogen, hosting Know Your Rights workshops, or rebuilding the orchiectomy barn. But perhaps we don't need to choose. We can organize mutual aid networks and share weird, hot, silly queer art. If nothing else, this collection is a reminder that although our adversaries might attempt to ban our books and erase us from the public record, they ultimately cannot prevent us from publishing whatever we want, whether it's meditations on trans phenomenology or something called Mr. Big's Phalloplasty Emporium. That's it.
Thank you. We need more weird, hot, queer, silly art. Yes.
Mhm.
We need more. And so the place where you can find some of that is right here in this brand new book. There you go. That just came out, Sex Change and the City. Thank you for that. And thank you for the laughs too. Much, much appreciated. So we will have some time tonight for question and answer. But before that, I get the honor of posing my own questions to all of you. And this could go on for a very long time, but okay, so I'll start by pausing and saying, is there anything that you wanted to ask each other or comment on for each other before I get into my list over here.
I mean, maybe get into your list and then we can think, like you're kind of
Yep.
giving us a moment.
Yep. Okay, so I've been obsessed since the previous WeHo Reads event that we had in person in October, which was a queer Latinx event all about transformation. So I've been kind of obsessed with this idea of transformation, and in particular about how books and our imaginations lead to transformations. Um, and so later, I think I want to hear from you about your own creative practice and how that maybe evolves over time as you get into a project. But to start, here's the question. How are you reshaping reality for your readers through your storytelling?
That's so fun. I think for me, what's really important in all of my work, including these books, is to create a space where the assumed audience is trans and knows a community of trans people. A very, very, very silly example of this is that, which is not important at all, but is just off my top of my head, very funny, is I was doing my first book event up for this tour with Kelsey McKinney, and she was like, I love that in the world of your book, Steve is the sex symbol of Sex and the City. And it had like never occurred to me that that was not universally true because he is like so T-boy coded that I was just like, yeah, every single submission was like obsessed with Steve. And so like obviously that's not like the real thing that I'm trying to like accomplish, but I think it's just like it's a world in which, our audience is assumed to be queer, our audience is assumed to be trans, our audience is assumed to be leftist, that has like a set of political values that we just like assume to be true and don't spend a lot of time trying to like justify. And similarly, we don't spend time trying to explain like why trans people are deserve to exist or are real or whatever.
Yeah.
We prioritize instead like Steve erotica. And that is like the world that I'm trying to make is when like all of that other stuff is a given and we can just like goof off.
From,
I'll go.
yeah, go Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of what I write is kind of escapist in various ways. Like you mentioned, my young adult books, which came out a few years ago, those are very escapist. Lessons in Magic and Disaster is not as escapist. It's much more about confronting the world as it is. But there's magic and there's witches, and eventually, towards the end of the book, a little bit of a spoiler, there's more witch community, and that sort of feels like queer community, like the way that the community of witches functions feels a lot like the community of queer people as well. And like, I feel like the main kind of thing in my books, like there's a lot of stuff that's like it really depends. Every book I write is different, and so I'm working on a book right now that I think has probably got more kind of escapist stuff in it. Again, it's a little bit lighter than Lessons in Magic and Disaster, the novel I'm writing right now. But I think the thing that's always kind of wish fulfillment for me in my books is that people do kind of learn to understand each other better over the course of the book. That's a thing that I always kind of, that I think, even though my books are really different from each other, that's always going to be the case, is that people learn to see each other more clearly. That's the thing I've been thinking about a lot lately as kind of a defining trait of my writing. And I think in real life, unfortunately, people often just never understand each other and never see each other clearly. And, I feel like that's real. It's not something that I'm particularly interested in writing about or even really reading about, because I feel like it's it's so just it's tragic and also a little bit tawdry and boring. The fact that we just go around not really seeing each other at all, and just so we could live in our own heads, and we just other people are just these blurry shapes, and we don't really see other people as people a lot of the time. And so I like to write about worlds where people do see each other and where people do understand each other, even though it's often really painful and hard and confusing and messed up. But I do, that is the thing that I kind of, that's my candy, I think, in my books, is the we're gonna kind of understand each other.
Yeah. Mara, do you want to add?
This one's a really fascinating question. I think how I go about like reconstructing the world or building it for my narratives is it's probably just I think we kind of I think Tuck mentioned it already that it's just writing that's a world that's just with the assumed audience that they're going to be a queer audience and a Latina audience. But more so now, and I think I'm just thinking about this because I watched Frankenstein and I feel like I was fighting for my life because not a lot of people I think understood Guillermo a lot of people were complaining that it's not a shot for shot remake of the book and are not engaging with the fact that it is a Mexican film by a Mexican director with a Mexican lead actor. People aren't engaging it on that front, and that to similar. So this is on my brain, and that I want to write or I rebuild a reality that's like a Mexican reality, one where the supernatural exists in a way that doesn't mean it's a supernatural genre, is that just happens, right? That just curses happen to us. We have curanderos, right? And that the science fiction this and the speculative is a blend of science fiction and fantasy and myth and the spiritual, and that it's not as clearly taxonomized and individualized the way I think it is in a lot of Western media, and that it's a bit more fluid and a bit less explained and more abstract and kind of just felt rather than observed. And we see this a lot with magical realism, and I think I want to build a world that is so familiar to ours but has so many fingers in its past as well as its future, to build something that I think in my opinion I would describe as Chicana futurism, and something that's a bit more loose and adaptive. And that's the reality that I want to build, where I can just have something that's a completely different genre happen at the very end of the story, even though it wasn't there in the beginning, because I've already set up a world where that can just be possible and that the reader can just kind of buy it without me having to over explain or even set it up in a certain kind of way, because that's just how Mexican stories go. um just I'm gonna tell a story Mexicanly is what I'm saying. That's how my realities are going. Mi gente Latino. But that's kind of how I go about building a narrative, and that influences everything as much as the reality of the world itself, as well as the structure the story will take. It'll be the voice, which is to me, in my opinion, also means the narrative device. If it's going to be epistolary, if it's going to be a list, if it's going to take some other kind of my short story, my novelette Sangronas is a series of rules that a bunch of Chicana vampires write down, but it's an entry point for this narrative, and that all of that I think feeds off of each other, and I just create these little sandboxes that are incredibly self-contained. Just examples of a far more fluid world with a different type of cultural mestiza, the type of which I'm often influenced from the teachings of Gloria Anzaldúa. Um, and that is, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, interesting. Like the idea that the craft is reflecting choices for presenting how do you say it? Like writing Mexicanly, right? And that might affect the structure and the way that certain things are handled within the story. I think that's really really cool. So this is, I mean, kind of related to that question, but I'm curious, just because advocacy is part of what we talk about in this series. I'm curious how justice or injustice shows up in your storytelling.
Can I go first?
You can go, yeah.
'Cause I haven't gotten to go first yet. I'm just saying, I'm seizing
You're number
this one.
one.
Okay, because I write horror, and I think horror is, for me at least, all about justice. Who pretends to wield justice? Is where is justice happening? Where is injustice happening? And I think that's one of the key elements of horror, is that it's often deeply unfair, and that justice seldom actually does happen in these narratives, and when it does, it's bitter, and it feels at what cost do we get it? Do we get justice? Do we get this type of advocacy for? And to me, that's being able to depict that and show, again, once again, to use the speculative to kind of play with these dynamics, to make the people who are often othered and made villainous in our news cycles and our main realities, showing that how they are actually like these the monstrous other is actually the ones who are being pursued by what is considered like mundane, by like the white heteronormative, like hegemonic like justice system, the punitive like is it like ICE, all of these things that claim to be like arms of justice and order and show how like truly monstrous they are, while those of us who are perceived as monster those of us who are perceived as monstrous, those of us who are perceived as unjust and wrong and wretched, is like play not even just like trying to, I don't want it to come off as like I'm trying to argue the humanity of our of my communities, but more so just like kind of just showing the ass of those who claim so piously to be in control and justice, and just showing how truly grotesque they are in comparison to just the complicated human ways in which everyone else tries to live, and that the only people who truly lack humanity are those who try to strip it from others with the excuse of justice to do so. And I think that is where my wheelhouse for horror is. I often spend a lot of time writing about ICE, writing about police violence. I think I have a unique lens of justice and power when writing about police violence because my father was an Oakland police officer, and I had to grow up in that environment and hear horror stories that were so normalized to the point of spoken through chuckles and smiling teeth. And you just sit there in abject horror at these things that are so casually passed around the dinner table, and for them to claim justice in doing so. And that's always fascinated me, and where again I'm able to use the horrific to just kind of just show a spotlight and get rid of all the lamp shading and all the shadow, and really show something for what it's really trying to hide underneath, which is just cruelty.
I'll go because I really loved what Mata said, and I want to build on that. I don't think I really write about justice. I write about violence a lot. Like violence is a thing. I wrote about. If you look at my newsletter, like a few weeks ago, I wrote a thing for my newsletter about how I'm obsessed with violence and how I just keep coming back to violence. And I think a lot about like, is violence ever justified? Like, is violence ever the right answer? And like, this is a thing I struggle with in my fiction a lot because I don't think I have an easy answer to this question. I'm not like, oh, violence is always wrong, but I also think that we think violence is right more often than it is. And like, I think about violence in different ways, like in Lessons in Magic and Disaster, the way that violence comes into the story is that it's about the ways that we trap people in narratives that are not the narratives that they want to be in. Like that's a form of violence that we do to each other, that we as queers do we to each other. It's a way that queers commit violence against each other, is to like be like, I'm going to define you in terms that are not terms that you define yourself in. I'm going to like, put you in a box that's not a box you belong in. It's like a way of imprisoning people inside a story that they actually are not, that they don't belong in, or that's not really their story. And I don't know. The other thing I'll say about it is that one of the things that's kind of a sleeper theme in Lessons in Magic and Disaster, which I kind of didn't think about until I was a long ways into writing the book, is this thing that they kind of struggle with. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but fuck it, I love spoilers. Later in the book, they kind of struggle with this idea of, do we curse our enemies or do we bless our friends? And I'm like, you bless your friends. Like if you curse your enemies, you're centering your enemies, you're making your enemies bigger in a bigger part of your life. You're making them, you're obsessing about them. You're kind of giving them letting them live rent free in your world. But if you bless your friends, you give your friends strength to fight back. You give your friends strength to thrive and to make something better, and to like be able to get so happy and fulfilled and powerful that they can just like walk right over these shitty people who want to rule over us. So that's kind of a thing that I was thinking about a lot in this book. And like I think the novel I'm working on right now has a lot about like kind of policing in a way. Like it's not police, but it's about policing in a way. And like, how do you do that without becoming a cop? How do you hold people accountable without becoming a cop? And like, what does that mean in a fantastical world? So it's a thing I'm always thinking about. The you look back, like everything I've written all throughout my career has been about violence in one some way or another, and like how do we, you know, like that gets back to what I was saying before about imagination. And I'm going to stop there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like due to the nature of this work that I'm doing, it's less explicitly like justice injustice focused. But I will say that like something I think is so interesting is how much I like have to think about this in my day-to-day life as someone where like something I think about a lot is how a diagnosable trait of autism is a strong sense of justice, which is so
Yeah.
interesting because it's like, what do you mean nobody else is feeling that? Like, why would that be a diagnostic criteria? Why isn't that just like default? So I do think about that a lot, and like I can feel the ways that we as a community of trans people and neurodivergent people sort of combined because there's so much overlap in these communities are like constantly thinking about justice in a way that it can sometimes feel spooky that not everybody is thinking about that. So that is like where that is coming up for me and like influencing my work in more subtle ways.
Yeah, I was thinking about your Too Trans, Too Furious, and the way you describe it is like there's like really no queer people in it, but we're like writing them in, and
Hmm.
So
that being so fascinating for like uh just like taking something that's like culturally so hetero and like queering it.
I have a question. So I want
Yeah,
to know, I've never seen any episodes of Sex and the City or the spinoff or the movies. I haven't seen a minute of any of this. But I want to know, I read about like the spinoff and which is called And Then There Were None. No, it's called And Just Like
and
That.
just like that, yeah.
It's it's called And Then There Were None. They get killed off one by one. At the end of it, they're all dead. No, and
Someone has
just
a
like
piece in the book that is
okay,
like
so
that, basically. So you're actually just
okay. So,
interpreting,
but
yeah.
like, isn't there like a non-binary podcaster comedian that like one of them
Yeah.
dates? And like everybody
Yeah.
hated that character. And like, I want to hear about justice for that character.
Yeah. They're also like light skinned Latinas. Like I was sort of feeling personally attacked by that specific character, but we had too many
So
identities in
do you
common.
like that character? Do you think that
No,
character
they were written
is
to be hated. There's a couple, there's like a piece and a half in this
uh,
as well where like they were kind of written so that it was impossible to like them. Um, and
uh,
so I think justice for that character would be like justice for the fact that it was written to be universally unlikable. Um,
oh,
and I
I
think
didn't
that is an
realize
interesting question
that.
as well. To be like, it was it better when there were no trans people, or was it, or no non-binary people and very few trans people, or was it better when they wrote the most insufferable non-binary character possible?
Hmm.
Only time can tell.
Well, before we wrap up, I do want to ask each of you one more thing at least, and that's, is there anything that we can celebrate with you tonight? There was a meetup last week of like writers at this conference, an LGBTQ plus meetup, and I asked this question, and it turned out to be so, I think, powerful and positive for the writers who were there that I thought maybe I would try it again now with you. Like, is there something that we can, give you happy juice and celebrate with you?
I'll just say today, Kirkus Reviews came out with their list of the best science fiction and fantasy books of 2025, and my Lessons in Magic and Disaster was on it, and I was so fucking stoked. It's a really great list too. So that was the thing that I'm currently celebrating and feeling super pumped about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay.
I mean, I'm just excited this book, The Sex Change in the City, came out uh last Thursday, so less than a week ago. And now I'm running around on tour, and so far I'm barely still alive. And I that's huge. My flight, all of my events did not get canceled due to flights, even though they almost did. That's huge. So yeah, I'm just excited that the book is out and I'm running around with it. It's great.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Charlie's not gone, by the way. She's plugging in her laptop because it's about to shut down. So we're at the end of the juice, but she'll be back. Mara, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, again, I kind of mentioned it at the beginning. I finally get to like talk about and mention that I have a short story collection coming out that
Woohoo!
I'm really again I'm trying to celebrate that. I'm excited about it. I just sent on Halloween night, I sent my editors the exclusive story that we have in that collection that will not be available elsewhere, while a lot of my other stories are available, be it like online or through paywalls and like through subscriptions and whatnot. I have an original piece
Right.
that I'm really excited for people to get to read called Tummy Aches with an exclamation point. And it is about this trans girl who feeds her memories to a monster that's, or like a man that's made out of teeth that lives under her bed and crawls into her orifice at night to scrape at her insides. And it's going to be lovely. It's fantastic. It's called Tummy Aches. Um, and I'm so excited for to talk about the collection, for people to read that story and the other ones in the collection, because some of them are difficult to find online. And I'm just excited to have more and more work coming out.
Excellent. Excellent.
And
By the
it's
way, I'm
yeah.
texting a fan of yours who says your science fiction is amazing too, LP Kindred. So it's lovely to have this like
LP Kindred said that. You tell LP
LP's
Kindred.
in the audience. LP's in the audience right now. I saw
You, you tell
his.
him that I said that he needs to meet me outside. I got a bone to pick with him.
you're smiling when you say that, so I'm gonna I'll pass it on saying it's gonna be great.
Have we been maybe texting slightly through this event? Perhaps, maybe. I'm not, I can neither confirm
Okay,
nor deny.
great. Okay, we're gonna wrap up very, very soon, but one last thing, like, is there any ask you have or encouragement or expectation or wish for our community in these, as Tuck wrote, very trying times?
Just
Put it
take
out
care of
there.
each other. Just fucking take care of each other.
Thank you. Yes.
I want to
Yeah, I
ask
think, oh, please go ahead.
after you.
I think that you'll have a better sort of closer. So I will go because I want it to end with you. But I just want to say that like often what I'm talking about with people lately is coalition building because I think that people are getting really it's like I would say, for example, like white trans people are really dialed into what white middle class trans people need or not so much thinking about like what other communities need necessarily all the time. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But I think that LA is actually a really beautiful place where that is happening, and California generally is like a really beautiful place where that is happening. And so I think everyone's doing a really inspiring job, and like I really appreciate the way that California is showing up for each other right now from across the country. So
With a banger of a closer, Mara.
I This might be a little bit of optimism that I got because I'm still writing the high from last week, how California is like Prop 50 passed and that Zora Mamdani won and that fucking Dick Cheney fucking died. I mean, who said that? Um, but kick the bucket. So maybe I might be a little optimistic here, but I just genuinely think that like again the cruelty on the right stems from a place of having people lose hope, and I think that the way you're able to rebuild that is through again being for there for one another. And that I think when people talk about community, it's so easy to think about it as this abstract, broad thing when community is like the people you see on the day to day. Is that like trans person you pass on your way to work? Is the little house of like punks and queers that like maybe you want to actually show up to the event, the potluck event, and bring something for and hang out and just like I want to remind people that like community comes at the cost of discomfort and inconvenience
Hmm.
oftentimes, but that's okay. And that you pay that price because we do owe each other everything. And that like we should constantly try and see what we can do for our fellow community, because that's where the community becomes a community. That's where again, we throw the word around. But yeah, what can you do for your literal neighbors? What can you do for the people you see in your life that you might not think much of on the daily and extending that kindness? And I think especially if we're getting on like these what is it trans remembrance and just to like think about like again the things the hardships that a lot of us in the queer community face, those who might not be queer in the audience, those who might be queer but are not trans, those who might be like trans, queer, any flavor of that, but are not a person of color. Try to recognize the different hardships that we all have and seeing solidarity in one another. Um, and again, going out of your comfort zone just a little bit all the time. And then I think that's how you build muscle, and you're able to do that easier every time. You get your gains in.
Your community gains.
Community gains. Come on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my closer. Everyone, get to the gym.
Get to the community gym, right, right. Well, Charlie Jane Anders, Olivas, Tuck Woodstock, it has been phenomenal hearing your wild and powerful imaginations and your thoughts and words. And I just want to thank you so much and wish you all my best through the rest of the week and the rest of these very trying times.
Thanks so much.
Community gains. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much for having us.